Uh, um, from a female detective to a male, and didn't have to change much of the writing.
They changed the name?
Yes, yeah.
Well, it could have been,
Yeah.
Chris or
Yeah,
Dylan.
they changed the last name of the character, but they didn't have to, for whatever reason, it did change. But no, they didn't really have to make much changes, other than they did change the name. And so I thought, heck, if they're gonna do that, I'll certainly jump in. Because right away, if you have this feeling, this mutual excitement,
Yeah.
and then by the time you get in the room, you've got a great crew and wonderful director, and I mean the producers and the writing, and there's also I'm fascinated by what's coming out of the small independent world, where people have to they really have to jam things in there because they don't have the budget, they don't have the schedule, and so a lot of shows today, for example, this one, I think they shoot these episodes in 3 days, 3 or 4 days. I mean, it's really fascinating what they're pulling off. So I was excited to be part of that.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a great thing if you. It's kind of like it's a great thing to have a thoroughbred with a good jockey. It's a tragedy if you got somebody who can't ride a horse and they're on a racehorse.
Right.
So I think it's a good thing when that can. And I'm not saying it should go on forever, because hopefully, and it's a lot easier for the performers than it is for the crew and the producers, because they're really against the clock and rock and rolling.
Well, Jeff, you talked about independent. This look like an independent TV show, and you really done a lot of independent films. And I believe the last 2 or 3 years, independent films won Academy Awards. How you feel about independent films? Not with the big studios and things like that.
Well, there's I'm sorry, I got thrown because I can hear my manager talking in there.
He's got your next deal up.
Yeah.
Can you shut the door?
Close the door and then close the deal.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Or when we close the deal and they close the door.
yeah, that's a very good question, because once something moves into big business, it has to answer to the bigger thing, and so it becomes investment in money, in time. And so when in the independent world, there's less money involved, and they have less time, but it seems to me there's less of a creative pressure. So in that shorter period of time and a shorter stack of money to make the film, and not having the cash to pull in certain individuals, you hopefully end up getting a group that really wants to be together for that project, and there's certain passion and beauty that comes out of that pressure. Doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's really nice.
Just one more question. Now, I'm here at Comic-Con, and I interviewed many personalities and actors, and a lot of stuff is going on the internet. How do you feel about now a lot of television shows and some movies just going straight to the internet? What do you feel about that?
Well, as far as residuals and jazz like that, or
that too.
I think on the one hand, the positive side, I think it's fantastic that there's always more platforms for more people to view more things, especially if it's entertainment or it's good things. It's a tragedy when it's bad jazz and it's sending out bad messages, and whether it's about people and other things. Then on the other side, on the business side of that, I think people who do work and it is set, whether it's residuals, and I'm not just talking from an actor's perspective, I'm talking about everybody. It's like if you're part of something and that element is cut out, it's a loss, so on that part, I'm not very excited about it. But look, I'm not complaining. I mean, my God, I make a living, and I make a living at playing. So in answer short, principle, and then there's some of us are lucky enough to win the lottery and make a living at this, so
Yeah, right.
that's a big question.
Yeah.
I hope that made
Yeah,
sense.
no, I
Yes,
talked to
it did.
Victor
Yeah.
McKay. We had an interview impromptu, and he basically went on about how he actually didn't like that online media was taking over because of the residual issues.
Well, and I have to say, if somebody is living and they're depending on the residuals,
Right.
that's a bad thing, because they're losing that.
He
Because,
said it was harder
you
and
know,
harder to make a decent living as an actor.
It is, and you know, and so, if one is coming from a place and they are making a living, then they're talking about principle. And if somebody's coming from another place where that is their living, and they had a couple of years, and they've had to move on to something else because they have loved ones, family, responsibilities, and that little gem is taken away from them, that's wrong. You know, and so there's the principle of it, and I think when one is coming from a comfortable place, the answer to a question like that has to be dealt with in a way where it doesn't sound like it's coming from greed, it's coming from principle.
Is there any roles in the recent past that helped you on Femme Fatales to get into character, or?
You know, someone asked me just last night about how I prepare for roles, and it's different all the time. I've been very lucky to work with great people and be around fantastic, amazing people in all these years, and I would always just, whether I was aware of it or not, sometimes I would be, that I'd be picking up some of their rhythms and some of their ways, and mixing it and sticking it dropping it into the stew and mixing it around. So I think every role preps us in a way for the next one. You know, you take a little more to the next one and move it around.
Thank you.
You mentioned having to work really quickly. Did your experience from your first job help prepare you for that, of talking about One Life to Live?
Oh, One Life to Live? Yeah, well, the interesting thing is, you know, I did that show because I had a theater group, and you know, having done Broadway and off Broadway and all this, you know, when you're in New York and you go, and this was back in the late 70s, early 80s, if you got a shot at a soap opera, that was a paycheck. It was like, okay, you know, and that was the wonderful time where the so-called, the mix of art and job, you know, so it was a big deal back then. I remember, if I may, as part of that answer, I mean, up the street, Alec Baldwin was on a show, and you know, on our show, I was doing a scene with William Hickey, one of the great theater actors from oh gosh, down the street was Meg Ryan. I mean, there were a whole lot of people on all these shows, and Kathleen Turner was up the street on another one, and I would say that they would all agree to this, that of having to do sometimes anywhere from 5 to 20 pages of dialogue a day, because every day was an episode, and every day was a full show. So if one approached it, which I did, it was a great training ground, because you'd have to, there were a number of things. You'd have to deliver quickly, you'd have to absorb the dialogue, and then you'd have to try to make something out of what sometimes, you know, as Robert Mitchum would say, sometimes we have to do a carpet commercial. You know, I mean, it just happens in your life. I mean, it's wonderful to be delivered gems, but to move with something like that, and then later on to have great writing and wonderful directors, and not that the directors before weren't bad or the writing was bad, but you just move into this other place, it's silk. You just roll through it.
Did you ever run into anyone from that show? In any of the
Gosh.
other projects?
That I was working on?
Yeah. Or socially?
No, I just didn't see anyone over the years. I think years later I ran into Gerry Anthony, and yeah. You know, I didn't know he passed away until I was in an airport one time, and years ago we were very close. We actually started a little theater group together, and I was in an airport. Gerry Anthony was this cat I worked with back in
Great actor.
80, 79, 80, 81. And this gal came up in the airport. She was a fan of One Life to Live from 25, 30 years ago. She said, and she said, "Yo, you must feel terrible about Gerry." I said, "What is? Oh, he passed away." I had no idea about that. Anyway, it's fascinating, this whole journey. You know, because the work, it changes and it's affected by everybody. We're products of everybody and everything we work with.
What's the secret to staying relevant? Because you're consistently
Yeah,
relevant.
that's true.
I don't know. I think part of it is, you know, we're lucky if we win the lottery, but we got to go down there and buy the ticket.
Yeah, have you had the same
So-
manager all this time? Is that what it is?
Well, I've known him in and out over the years, yeah,
Yeah.
and he years ago was my agent, and so he's given me great understanding and freedom that if I'm in Afghanistan or all these other places, because I go off on my adventures, and there's never any pressure that you have to deliver, because, you know, these cats make their living off us, you know, so but he was always, I mean, Robert Rodriguez got a hold of them, they found me in Afghanistan, flew me back to Grindhouse and all that, and it's lost, I was in Venezuela, you know, and it would all go through him, so there's a,
What, you mean Antarctica next or something? What's going on?
Well, you're talking about adventures. What kind of adventures do you go on?
well, I work with the U.S. Committee on Refugees and Immigrants and the International Community Coordinating Council for American Universities, so I'm in the conflict areas quite a bit. And, but I mix it, you know, going back and forth on Lost, was not commuting, but I was going back and forth from Afghanistan to the island and the Western Sahara, back and forth. That's part of your answer.
Yeah.
Is that this is a great job, and I'll be an artist in my next life, but this is a great job.
What does that international work entail?
Well, the U.S. Committee on Refugees and Immigrants, there's 14 million refugees in the world, and we're one of the organizations that just try to sometimes put pressure, but in a soft but strong way, the countries that are signatories of the 1951 convention that get international aid for refugees, then they have to stand up to the rights that they agreed to in the convention. And that's the right to movement, right to education, right to eventually to own land, to be moved forward to a third country or repatriated if there isn't conflict and it's safe to go back, or absorb them in their own country. It's pretty complicated, I don't want to take away from the jazz, but it's part of that answer, is that I feel lucky to do that. I really feel lucky to do this, and it doesn't mean that I don't respect this. I mean, really, I give 1,000%, and when I'm with people, I really dig and respect the artists that I've worked with.
But doesn't that fuel the artist part of you?
I think
you
everything
know?
does.
Yeah.
I think everything does. You know, I mean,
Because I would have never thought that, you know. I mean, it seems like you bring a worldly quality to your roles, and I can now see why, you know, in terms of what you're doing around the world.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why you're so relevant. That's why you've been in a lot of shows and movies and things like that. You know, maybe your inner spirit just really comes out on camera.
maybe, I don't know.
I mean, you've been in a lot.
Yeah, and some answers I don't want. Some questions I don't want
Right.
to know the answer, you know. Maybe I'll figure it out later. But right now, I'm digging the ride.
Oh yeah, you're a good actor. We love watching you.
You have a bunch of projects coming up that you're working on?
Yeah.
They look pretty busy for you.
Yeah, there's another film here called Sushi Girl, and which is another
Yeah,
little independent thing, and
Cool film.
it just, you know, I was with my manager, he's talking about Tony Todd. He said he's doing this great film. I said, hey, tell Tony I said hello. They want me for a day. I'm in town. I ended up on that thing, and it's turned into this wonderful. You know, and Rodriguez is down here the other day. Robert.
That's going to be something
talking
special.
about. Yeah.
Is this your first Comic-Con?
Yeah, this is, yeah.
How's the
I
experience
kinda-
been?
Well, I have to say, you coming into a new village, you've all been very kind. But the last festival I was at is in '89, when Eastwood and I went to the Cannes Festival for White Hunter Black Heart in Kurosawa. That's when you premiered Dreams. So that's the last festival, and I've never been to a Comic-Con, and so this is the first time in a gathering like this, and I know they're different. That's a market, and this is a festival, or whatever.
This is
Yeah.
It is-
Convention, yes.
Yeah,
This
convention.
is an experience.
This, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because this convention it's the fans and the media and the cats who do what I do, we're guests. Whereas it seems that at the other markets and festivals, it's the inside people who have this thing happening, and all the fans are the guests. So it's just flipping
Turn
everything
inside
around,
out, yeah.
but it's fascinating here. Because the wall seems to be broken and everybody's being cool.
Well, it's also expanded beyond comics, projects that have nothing to do
Yeah,
with
yeah.
sci-fi or comics or.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
To follow up, do you feel like you want to come back next year and
Oh,
promote
sure.
certain things?
Yeah, if I'm in this part of the globe, I'll come through. I'd be happy to.
Have you been pitched for any new projects since you've been here? Because there's so many industry people here. You kind of hinted at that.
No, actually, I've just been talking to people and my manager, I mean, maybe people have been talking to him, but I've just been talking to you cats, and it's been great. I mean, there's no pressure. It's like the panel I did yesterday, the sushi girl thing, and the one that will happen tonight for Femme Fatales. You're around so many other people, and everybody's, they're so deep inside the show. So I may answer a question here and there, but while I'm in these panels, I'm actually learning in the process more about what it is that they do. So I'm really enjoying this.
Your collaboration with Rodriguez, do you see yourself returning to his films? I mean,
Oh yeah,
great
yeah.
role as
We get along great, and we just had dinner. I was in Austin last month or so, and yeah, we'll do some things together. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about Robert and that group. It's very, very family.